Welcome everybody. No, I was going to say First Offender Fridays after the holidays, but that is an injustice. I think we've had one already, one or two, one. I think
One.
it was covered, I think, by Ken, right? Like last week. Awesome. Well, anyway, from my part, welcome everybody. Usual pitch here is that we get to talk to all kinds of interesting people in cybersecurity on the defensive side, particularly. Cybersecurity is getting bigger and bigger and wider, and there's all kinds of things to learn about. So we want to make that circle really large and bring everybody to learn about these things. So this is a really informal discussion. Like we've got the chat. If people have questions, feel free to join in. This is not a slides thing. And so today we've got John Hubbard with us. How's it going?
It's going fantastic. How are you?
Excellent. Do you want to start maybe with doing a quick intro about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So I do a couple different things. Largely, a lot of my time is spent working with and teaching for, authoring for SANS. I'm a senior instructor there and also the cyber defense curriculum lead and author of two courses in the security operations space, which is Sec 450, which is the SOC analyst training side, and then LDR 551, which is the building and leading security operations center. So love the management aspect, love the technical piece of it, taught a little bit of both over the years and keep those courses. Run my own podcast called the Blueprint Podcast, where I just go find people doing interesting things out in the industry and help them tell their story, give them a platform to get more detection information out and anything else like that. And then do some consulting and other various things like that, all in the security operations space.
Nice. Yeah, interesting. Courses on SOC, a very little topic, right? I'm sure that's going to be a pretty big agenda for those.
It certainly is. I can tell you across the two classes, it's probably 900 slides a class, and then
Ooh.
another. I mean, I don't know. I know I at one time I knew the word count, and it was somewhere around 260,000 in one of the classes. So like, it's a massive book series. Yeah.
Nice,
So it's
nice,
quite the
nice.
undertaking. But yeah, love talking about this topic. Love teaching it. It's definitely my favorite thing to discuss.
Awesome. And yeah, so we were just mentioning right before we started that sounds like you've got some topics that you hold dearly that you wanted to chat about. So I mean, let's just get into it.
Yeah, so a couple different things, right, is on my mind. A couple different things that are on my mind, and probably a lot of stuff that's on everyone's mind is where is AI going to be taking us in 2026? Looking at what is that going to mean for SOC from the technical perspective, the leadership perspective, and then how are the tools and technology beyond the AI piece just kind of shifting with it? I'll lead off with just a little bit of, I think, the setting the stage of what leads me into some of the things I'm thinking in these areas. Two trends that I'm following right now, and I love talking to like early stage startup companies, folks like that, just kind of seeing what's on the very, very bleeding edge so we can stay ahead of it. But the one thing I'm seeing obviously a lot of now is a shift from the traditional like monolithic SIEM that has a bunch of storage and may or may not be affordable to a lot of different companies to the data lake style. Let's store everything, put it in object storage, solve the data gravity problem and make it so that you can affordably capture a bunch more data and make it possible to do detection that you may have not been able to do before because of that new capability. And ideally do it at a much lower price and something that's, actually allows you to gain that visibility because as volume keeps going up, obviously price would too, to some point where you're saying, all right, I can't pay for that anymore. And the other one being just the whole AI security operations, tool set coming to maturity or further maturity. I wouldn't say maturity yet, but I mean, it's certainly getting there. And I know you guys are doing something on January 20th, so I'm interested to see what that's going to be about. But I've been talking to a lot of organizations kind of in that space as well, and just looking at the trends and how those things are architected and trying to do a lot of thinking of what is that going to do for the traditional, three-tiered SOC, trying to triage alerts, work their way through, escalate problems, threat hunt, do all that sort of stuff. And I would say overall, right, with those two things, what really excites me is something that I'm always talking about in classes, which is like operations tempo is going to be able to significantly increase. One of the things that I'm always talking about as a talking point is like it doesn't matter how good your team is if you can't respond fast enough. If you have all the data, if you have world-class threat hunters, but you're still strung up by process and workflow and playbooks or whatever that doesn't move at least as fast as the attackers, if not much faster, ideally, you're still going to be lost, right? And so it's a whole OODA loop thing. If I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that, model. You need to be able to do all those steps and do them faster than the other side. And so when we have AI, obviously that is going to significantly increase both the volume, kind of the bandwidth and the latency of the things that are going on in the SOC, both of which we need. Now, of course, attackers are going to be up in their speed as well, but I think and this is where I'm getting into conjecture here, but I'm hoping that a lot of this is going to be resolved by the blue team side AI, because a lot of what's helping them win in the past has just been we can't move fast enough and we can't move high enough volume of tickets through the whole queue and system to get it done. But with a bunch of AI bots on our side, we may be able to actually do that. So ultimately, this is leading to me seeing a bright future for the blue team, and I'm really excited to see where this wave of new technology is going to take us.
Super interesting topic. Obviously, very, selfishly, very interested by that. I'm curious, like, so you mentioned the thing that I really hooked on, like around the maturity of it. I think, we're seeing like different models. I don't mean LLM models, but like just concept of operations around AI.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like we've seen like a couple of different attempts. Where do you see like what concept of operation do you see as working best these days? Have you seen some, have you seen that mature, well-oiled, works well kind of model yet?
I've seen a couple of different variations on that, and a lot of what I see, well, I mean, there's the things that I see, but then there's a whole lot more that I hear about just polling classes as I fly all around Earth and talk to various people in various industries. And when I say, who's using an AI-powered security operations tool of some sort right now, lots of hands, right? It is creeping in anywhere and everywhere. That's not a surprise to anybody. But then I usually follow that with, and who's actually seeing the value and it's meeting the promise, meeting the hype, and things like that. And some hands do stay up, and other ones are a little bit less enthusiastic about the response that they're getting. And I think that's, natural in any product space where it's a brand new thing and there's a whole bunch of people taking a swing at it, and some are succeeding better than others. And so, what I've seen in some of the products that people seem to like is those things where we are there's a couple different ways I would split it out, right? The AI helping people make decisions or ask questions and then make better decisions based on the things that they're seeing. So this is your typical problem with a tier one analyst. They don't know what question to ask. So you could, have an AI assistant saying like, here's the thing that happened. Here's the context. Here are some questions you might want to consider. And then it can probably help you solve those things. So decision support, decision guidance, and then just kind of question and answer kind of help there. And then on top of that, I guess very, very similar to that is looking at kind of from a coaching perspective, right? Where you would have potentially in the past a tier one analyst saying like, hey, tier two, tier three, can you help me understand this? Can you coach me through this or whatever? It's acting as a bit of a mentor, a bit of a coach, and leading people where they couldn't have gone without maybe bothering some other person and taking them away from their work. So certainly it can help that. It can do more faster. It can help you get into details like taking apart malware, triaging phishing email, triaging some important phishing email like the business email compromise and stuff that it wasn't malware, it wasn't a link, it was an ask for a transfer of money, right? It's making some significant differences there. And then just leading further and further into, as I look at some of like the newer companies I've talked to, like full on whole swarm of agents dissects every single component of a problem, tears it all apart, brings it back together and say, with X confidence, I think this is what happened here. Here's all the guidance that goes with it. And ultimately, it just helps everything run smoother.
And how what do you think about the cost side of things, right? Like to me, that's always, these somebody's got to get paid.
Yep.
And I love the idea of throwing a swarm of AI at the problem and analyze it from what is it, like somebody a while back had kind of pitched this idea of like the precog idea, right? Of like,
Hmm.
I'm going to have three different models, look at every piece of information and make different calls and all that stuff. But at some point, there's got to be an ROI. How have you seen that?
Yeah, there's a couple things I can mention in that regard. So I was doing an episode of the podcast I run a while back with a guy from Elastic who is, I can't remember his exact title, but he was in security and one of the heads of their like the AI parts of getting the Elastic stack running with AI. And he had pointed out that there was a company that was using some of their new tools and like unprompted, right, said like, hey, this is what we saw, and here are the actual numbers. And it was a company called Presidio, so you can Google that, case study, but they actually had numbers with it. And they said they saw like a, whatever percent drop in this, and the cost of the AI to like integrate with these things was like a couple cents per investigation, which if you think about an analyst's salary and the time and how much you're paying them, right? Like that's something that can considerably, make things better at a, seems like a very, very reasonable rate. Other things I've seen in this realm, I was talking to another company earlier this week, and they said their approach to this was when they install their product, they take a snapshot of what's going on, how fast everything is working, all the typical speed metrics and everything else. And then as they start onboarding more and more capabilities and their AI agents start taking over, you can actually see like, here's where you were when we started day one. Here's where you're going, right? And that's another thing that tied in with an article I read. It was on the 7th, I think, in the Wall Street Journal, where they were talking about AI, not AI, cybersecurity hiring is kind of flattening out. And CISOs are looking for, first and foremost, can I get a tool in here that has a clear ROI? Is it effective? And then using that kind of, solution before going to hire people. So yeah, ROI is absolutely in the focus, and it's something I've seen in nearly every tool, every company I've talked to. They are seemingly pointed straight at like, here's how we're going to prove that this is useful, because if you can't, when budgets are scarce, right, you're going to get kicked out. So yeah, absolutely a big trend I'm seeing as well.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Somebody asked, I thought that was interesting. The like your thoughts on the DFIR side of it. Now, I understand like your specialty like sounds like it's more on the SOC. I don't. Does that include kind of the more forensic side of things in your mind, or how do you think about it?
So it does. Again, yes, your caveat is perfect. I am not a forensics person. I have done some forensics and cosplayed a forensics person in the past, right? But that's not necessarily me. But with that caveat, right? One thing that did just get announced, and I haven't even had a chance to dig into this myself, but there was a new release of the SANS like Sift virtual machine loaded with a whole bunch of tools. It's called Protocol Sift, which is going to be a thing that can take a bunch of forensic evidence, tear it all apart, and then make some, conceivably significant and awesome forensic analysis happen much more quickly and much more reliably than may have been able to, happen in the past. And it does that through knowing all the tools that are there, knowing the commands, right? Taking over the command line, running through all those things. So I have not worked personally with that side of it, but I know that I see a lot of conversation between DFIR instructors about that. Some good, some bad, right? I have absolutely seen in our like SAN Slack people be like, hey, this is junk, right? It's trying to tell me this and that. And like that number is absolutely wrong. I don't remember the specifics, but especially in forensics, right? Yes, it can be useful. Yes, it apparently is useful, but you, like anything else, need to check very, very carefully. And especially in that realm, if you're taking that to, a legal case or whatever, you do not want to be relying on AI only. That is even more verification required in that realm.
Yeah, that's definitely kind of worm for sure. On on that side, just to share a little tidbit that I thought was I was my mind was blown a little bit. With one of our engineers internally, at some point we kind of had the question that came to our mind. We're working a lot with Cloud Code, so the CLI tool, and the question was essentially, hey, can Cloud Code do reverse engineering of some type, right? Like, what does it do if I give Cloud Code 100 good files, 100 bad files, like, and I ask it to help? What's it going to do? And so he went and did some tests. The TLDR was one specific example he came back with was, hey, here's a report that Cloud Code's given me about like a bad file that like, yes, is bad. It's part of some botnet. and typical like markdown report, and you read it and you go like, well, this is talking with a lot of authority, and it's the right sample, and like there's a lot of details in there. And so my first thought was, okay, well, this is probably bullshit, right? Look, it doesn't have Ghidra, it doesn't have like any of these tools. How could it possibly know that? And so that engineer went back in and essentially kind of interrogated a little bit more the model of like, hey, how did you come to these conclusions? Let's look at the tools that you called and all of that. And this is where my mind was a little bit blown, because looking back at it, what we saw was it living off the land and using file to determine the file type. Okay, that's easy. Running strings over the binary, like, okay, yeah, that's easy. Running various like instances of hex dump, looking for various byte patterns, and it really got into weeds. To the point where it's fascinating to see, like, I doubt that it was ever trained to do some basic reverse engineering, right? Like, let's be frank here. But it's still so much better than I actually thought it could get, which I feel like it speaks to the magic, I think, of those models in cybersecurity. I think is really
Yeah.
incredible.
There's a lot to be said about surprising emergent behavior in LLMs and models like that. And one thing that what you were just saying that reminded me of with Claude Code that I heard yesterday was this emergence of this tool they just created that you can only have it now if you have the Max plan, but Claude Cowork, which is like Claude Code for normies that don't want to use the terminal, right? Ultimately, that is something I see a lot of future of the desktop experience with a computer in. And if people haven't heard of it, it's an Google Claude Cowork, but it's a thing that you can just, instead of having a chat back and forth, have it run your whole desktop for you. And it throws files you want it to manipulate into a sandbox so that doesn't necessarily run rampant all over your hard drive and do something crazy. So there's some security built into it. But you can basically like have it working on 5 different things at once, controlling your desktop, reading your files, doing whatever. And I think about, one, that's just purely awesome for any given purpose. But for security analysts, right, if we can now automate our entire desktop reading of files and everything else, that goes even further than using AI to look at your log files, look at context and everything else. And now we can have it potentially, we are literally potentially going to be orchestrators saying like, do this on this one. And well, it's working. Do this on this one. Do this on this one. And we're going to have to be maybe split brain in a lot of different ways. But it's exciting. I think the way we use computers is going to be dramatically different within a year or two. And that's probably the first kind of crack in the shell of traditional computer use moving to the new one.
Absolutely, and that's a good segue into. My main exposure these days to all of this is through the software engineering side of things,
Mhm.
and I think there's a good parallel to software engineering being changed by these new tools. One of those changes is, okay, it's a lot faster to produce code. So then it changes how people view the code review. There's more emphasis on code review, but there's also more code to review. So it's kind of a, like it's a pressure, right, from two different areas. Have you seen, or do you have thoughts on what that similar kind of pressure change is going to be on the SOC? Like, I'm wondering, if it means that more junior analysts can perform more investigations. Does that mean we end up with just more escalation? You know what I mean? Like, there's different dynamics that are going to be changing here, right?
Yeah, one of the really interesting things about Cowork is the tool wrote itself, basically. Like Claude Code wrote Claude Cowork, and they brought it from, oh, this is a pretty good idea, to here you go, it's done in 10 days. Now it's still in very much alpha form, but the thing wrote itself, right? Point being, velocity is like a huge thing that we can unleash now against attackers, and as defenders, hopefully move much more quickly than we have in the past. As soon as we have a good idea, even if it's very, very complex, right, we can have a whole swarm of agents go out and start coding a custom tool to fix that thing, assuming we have learned the skills and gone through that workflow before and understand how that works. But yeah, so for the SOC, right, not only is it going to be rapid development and deployment of any kind of custom tooling you need, but The analyst job, yes, is going to very much change, right? Now, one thing I'm very interested in is what is going to happen with the tier one analyst. And I've heard everything from, oh, it's fine, we're all going to become super analysts doing a bunch of stuff, to people tell me, and this was not like, I'm not going to quote who it was, but they're like, yeah, that kind of job is a little bit going away. And I'm like, going away, changing? What do you mean there, right? And, it kind of depends on how you define that. But I think what is clear, no matter on how you want to frame it, is a lot of the tasks that were done by someone in that role in the past are no longer going to be done. But it's also the stuff we didn't generally like to do. But if there are less of those roles, and that's what the Wall Street Journal article was saying, is like hiring is slowing down. We're not getting rid of roles, but maybe we're not hiring as fast because AI is taking care of some of that. What are going to be the accurate skill? I mean, the skills that are, hireable in the future, right? So for analysts, no matter what the tier, if you are looking at a bunch of high velocity investigations and other things that are happening fast and furious, you're doing a lot of context switching between a bunch of different scenarios. You're looking at validating what did happen versus doing the work yourself. But if you think about that, what do you need to know to do the validation? You still need to know how to do the work. You're just reviewing someone else's work instead of maybe typing the commands yourself. So there's going to be an interesting interplay there between we are able to do more and more quickly, but the skills that it took to do that maybe are not as valuable directly because we're not using them, but we still need them to do the validation. So I'm not entirely sure where things are going to go. We're going to speed up and we're going to, I don't know, decrease some skills needed and increase others. I think the validation thing is where a lot of that's going to go as we speed up.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like it's a pipeline problem
Hmm.
where we are, we're looking at today, we have a single pipe and we have liquid going, I don't know, a liter a second through it. Fine. And now we're saying, hey, the front load of this, actually we can make way bigger. Right now I can profile 100 different endpoints at the same time and perform an investigation on them. That's great, but the rest of the pipeline now is just swamped and you're just going to get back pressure, right?
Hmm.
So I feel like that's what we're seeing in software engineering is we can build software extremely quickly, but we still have to test it. And sometimes it helps with testing. We still have to deploy it. Sometimes it helps with deploying. We still have to like validate. And all of those things are what are really putting back pressure. So I'm curious. I'm curious without knowing the answer here. What's the shape of that pipeline that we're going to have to change in the SOC in the future? Is it purely just saying like hire a bunch of senior engineers to do the validation? Maybe, but I don't know. I'm not convinced.
Yeah. The kind of mental model I always talk about the SOC kind of pipeline, as you mentioned, is like what are we doing in a SOC when it comes to like technical, pushing things through detection and ultimately resolution? It's collecting a bunch of data, detecting the bad stuff within it, triaging all of that in order of importance, and hopefully being accurate about how risky each item is, then doing an investigation to validate whether it's real or not, and then incident response and the resolution of those problems. And we talk always about the theory of constraints, and the thing being there is always a bottleneck in any process that is a serialized set of steps. And in the past, I think a lot of the bottleneck was in the triage process because you have three analysts, you got 10 problems, right? You can only work three roughly at a time until things can go through. Now, SOAR opened up that a little bit and got some of those steps done, maybe automatically gathered some context and everything else. But if I play through what an AI agent can do now, they're going to be doing probably a lot of the triage for you, a lot of the investigation for you, and it's going to push that validation to the end of the investigation and saying, I did the triage, I did the investigation. Is it right? And then if it's right, what do you want me to do about it? And again, right, as I look at a lot of these products, most of them do have full auto mode. So you could have them be like, you know what, we trust you. Go do the thing, block the site, do whatever you got to do, right? Isolate the endpoint. They say, these organizations are like, we don't recommend people jump into full auto mode right away because that's probably not going to end well, right? You want to build some confidence in certain use cases and go up from there. But I think largely, right, that's where the new work is going to be, is in a pile up of validation of work that has happened. And then as we build more and more trust and turn things more into automated workflow, maybe validating once it has taken the action, like is this all still okay? Did it take the right action, even though it actually solved the problem all the way for you? And so that's going to be a really interesting place to be. And I think the metrics around quality are going to be a lot more important than the past metrics around speed and MTTR and MTTD and all that kind of stuff we've always used in the past, because it's all going to happen really quick. I can quote you a number. One of the vendors I talked to recently in the AI SOC space said like most of our investigations are done within 7 to 8 minutes after all the agents quit running and the solution is found. Like that's the time they're working at now. So after that, right? What's left? You got to see if it did the right thing and what was the impact of what it did, and was it right?
Yeah, yeah. So that's fascinating. You mentioned quality. I think there's also the question of completeness of the process, right? Like
Hmm.
I look back to where is software engineering and AI used right now, because I think we can reliably kind of look sideways and say, where software engineering is now, like in 6 months or a year, maybe security is going to kind of like start to get to the same levels. And today, right, the latest kind of greatest fad, some might say, but like I think it's not, is very interesting, is the whole concept of Ralph loop in software engineering, meaning like the TLDR, right, is like, I'm going to put an AI to work on this problem, and I'm just going to get the AI to just keep, hitting its head on that problem until the problem is solved.
Hmm.
And people are seeing, amazing outcomes coming out of that. However, it has a little requirement in there, which is completion. And so, there might be an interesting question for the SOC, which becomes, well, if we can codify that whole loop, right? Like, hey, we can throw more agents, great things happen. But how do we qualify what is completion? And yeah. Anyway, that's a whole problem set, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things I also like talking about is how to measure things that are very difficult to measure, right? So if you play that out, what is quality? What is the sign of bad quality, right? What would you observe in a SOC that had great quality of resolution versus one that was poor? Largely, it'd be like reopened tickets and stuff that was missed, right? And so if you look at like how often does the AI rip through, finish things, and then you got to go back and clean something up, and the answer is never, then either you're all completely missing something and you'll find out one day, and then you can increase that number. Hopefully, it doesn't happen that way. Or, right, you catch things and you say, oh, there was still something that was insufficiently cleaned up, this or that happened. And then you can catch those errors and hopefully go back, feed that into improvement loops and make things better.
Hmm. So what are you looking forward to, like at the moment? Where are you focusing your attention? You think interesting things are going to come in 2026?
I think largely what I'm excited about is with all this new capability to grind through the less exciting work. One, right? Analysts and people working in the SOC are going to be more free to do proactive threat hunting, where a lot of the stuff is reactively kind of dealt with for you in the background. You make a quick couple decisions, that's over, back to threat hunting, and you can find the really nuanced stuff. And the other thing is, as you get better and better and clear out some of that reactive junk and everything else, I think that mentally is going to free people up to like zoom out, right? A lot of times you're like so just in the weeds in the sock in the past because all of this stuff was constantly happening and taking your attention. It was hard to remember, like, hey, this is all supporting a business, right? But like when a lot of that is happening and a lot of that context is showing up for you, you can say, oh, here's a bunch of alerts. Here's how they tie to a business process and how important is that process and who are the people behind it. All that's just going to be much more apparent because the tools are going to provide it to you. And hopefully, we'll have more mental bandwidth to actually pay more attention to that, which makes security more clearly a return on investment that people are seeing and understanding, which hopefully continues to fuel a whole, like series of new defenders and defensive capability and, happy lives in the sock for forevermore.
Very cool, very cool. So we're pretty much at the end here. I'm curious, if folks want to get in touch with you, they have questions, they want to chat about things. What's the best way to get in touch?
Hit me on LinkedIn. Super easy to find me there. Through the Sans website, any kind of things like that. I'm easy to Google, so you can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably the main one. I would go there.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming in. That was super interesting. Certainly, a lot of things are going to be changing in a sock. So, yeah, Very,
Yeah, thanks
very
for having me.
interesting
Had a
chat.
great time.
All right. Have a good weekend, everybody.